In this video, it will be 3 things UConn. We will look at Aubrey Griffin and her health of her knee. 2, Azzi Fudd. Is she any closer to making a decision? And what does Geno or think? And thirdly, who is UConn looking at in the transfer portal? Now, before we start, if you enjoy the content, then please consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. So yes, I don't think I need to do at this stage a full preview of Arkansas State, seeing that UConn is minus 44.5. I think at this stage it's pretty much assured that they will get that victory, and you would expect that they would see out both games on the weekend getting victories. So I think more importantly, what I will be watching when UConn plays is the minutes that Aubrey Fudd gets and how she looks over the weekend. Immediately after the Big East tournament, Geno said that Aubrey Griffin would be ready to go, no doubt.
Do you expect Aubrey to be ready for the tournament?
Yeah, 100%.
And then the other day after the brackets were announced, he said the plan was to ramp Aubrey up this week to get her back at practice and slowly build up her minutes of practice.
But it helps Aubrey. What's her status? Is she full go? Is she limited?
We'll see. Right now, we're waiting to get her back full in practice.
Is that more just rest still and soreness?
Yeah, I mean, when you're trying to get back into practice full after you've not practiced for 6, 7, 8 days, whatever, it takes time. So we're hoping that, tomorrow she can do more than today, and then the next day she can do more than that, and go from there.
That's a little bit more. We need to see how she goes, and we'll evaluate. And all going well, you wouldn't expect that she would have an issue. It was an ACL repair, but it will be big on the weekend's game. Does she play in that first game? And then even almost more important, is she able to back up with a day of rest and play in the following game? As that would be the hope and the expectation. The fear is if that knee gets swollen on her or continues to be irritated, then that would be a big, big issue for UConn. As obviously not this weekend. Aubrey Griffin is not really that important, you wouldn't suspect, for this weekend's games, but it's more in relation to down the track. And this is sort of Captain Obvious, but UConn wants her healthy for USC, as they have Kennedy Smith and Juju Watkins, and having her available will be crucial. In the previous tournament versus USC, Q got some time as Geno was desperate to get length out on the court. And that will be just as important in this go-around, obviously, with freshman Kennedy Smith, who is a long guard or forward at 6'1". Plus, obviously, you have Juju Watkins. And having Aubrey Griffin available is crucial for that matchup. So I think that's one of the more important things I will be looking at this weekend. Now the second thing, will Azzi Fudd stay or go? The truth is nobody knows, but Geno Auriemma was talking at a morning breakfast at the Chambers of Commerce breakfast, and he had a few things to say about Azzi Fudd. Essentially, he had a few things to say about a lot of stuff. It seems like fans are allowed to ask questions that pay to go to this event, I assume. And this comes from the CT insider from Maggie Vanoni. Now, Auriemma is saying he does not know, saying, who knows? I think she will. I think Azzi will, Auriemma said. But again, I'm not the number one voice in their ear anymore like I used to be. Now there's a lot of voices. I'm hopeful. I think besides, if she stays one more year, she'll be making more money next year when she goes into the draft, because they'll have a new collective bargaining agreement coming up that should pay more money than she'll get at the end of this year. Now, a few things with this. Geno could just be playing coy. He could already know. Supposedly, he wanted an answer after the Big East tournament, so maybe he knows, maybe he doesn't. It does sound interesting that there are other voices. I don't know if he's alluding to her trainer, her agent, or what. I think it's pretty clear he thinks that she needs a little bit more seasoning. And you could argue this. You could say, well, it's in his self-interest to say that. I think he'd be the first one to say that. But when he was talking in another press conference, he outlined how at times Fudd for about 35 minutes, will be locked in, and everything that she does is magic, essentially.
And she'll go through maybe, in an hour and a half practice now, she may go through 35 minutes of like, it just flows, man. Everything that comes out of her hand is just magic, and you try to keep her in that space as much as you can.
And my take from that is he just thinks he wants her one more season just to mold her and get the best out of her. Again, you can argue the other point. Of course, the coach wants talent to stay. I've done a previous video on this, on the pros and cons of Azzi staying or going. In terms of the big con, it's obviously the risk of injury. But other than that, I tend to agree with Auriemma. It makes more sense to stay, get as healthy as you can before going into the WNBA. The WNBA contracts aren't protected. Stay another year, be a solid number 1 pick potentially, or a very high draft pick versus being a very uncertain where are you going to be drafted. If somebody loves her like the Valkyries, then maybe they'll take a chance at 5 on taking Azzi Fudd. But nobody really knows, and it's obviously some of it depends on what sort of tournament she has. If Fudd does decide to return, then UConn is pretty well set up for next year, as Sarah Strong will return, and she is obviously going to be a star. Combine her with Fudd, not to mention KK and Ashlyn Shade are a year older. But the team does have a potential weakness, which, like this season, is the front court. Now, that being said, I think Jana El-Alfie has showed a lot of promise, and I think UConn is comfortable with her coming back next year and combining with Sarah Strong. I see her as the starter next year at the 5. As well, Ice Brady would be in the mix, either playing some 5 or power forward minutes. However, they would obviously like more depth, and where they might be getting their depth, according to the CT Insider, UConn is looking at Sarah Williams, who plays for Wisconsin. Their coach is resigned at the end of the season, and she has entered the transfer portal. Williams plays forward or center. She's 6'4". She's a junior. Last season for Wisconsin in the Big Ten, she averaged 19 points. She shoots just over 50% from two-point range or on two-pointers, only 8% from three-point range. If you look at her shot chart, just around the arc, she was like, from three-point range, it was like 9%, and then 0% in the corners, and then 32% in the mid-range game. She does most of her most efficient work in the key, shooting 45% inside the key and 66.7% at the rim. The majority of her shots come from the mid-range game, and then inside the key, the mid-range 29%, and then in the key 27%, at the rim 41%. If you watch the highlights of her, she's athletic. She moves well. Her on-off numbers, in addition, she just doesn't put up stats. Her on-off numbers are pretty good. As her net rating was plus 6.9 with her on the court. Williams is originally from Brooklyn, New York, but she moved to Toronto in 2018. That obviously conjures images of Aaliyah Edwards. I'm sure UConn would be happy if she could produce like Edwards in the front court. But you can be sure UConn will not be the only school with interest, as a 6'4" forward/center that averaged 19 points, 9.8 rebounds, and 2.3 block shots per game. Yeah, there'll be a lot of interest in Williams, but it appears UConn is throwing their hat into the ring to try to get more depth in the front court. Now it's over to you. Are you confident in Aubrey Griffin's health? And do you think, like me, that is very important for UConn moving down the road? 2, do you see Azzi Fudd staying or going? Do you think she's already made her decision? Do you think Geno's being a little bit coy there? And lastly, what do you think? Do you see Williams going to UConn, or UConn being able to land her? All your comments and poison are welcome. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great night.